Is imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow with Andy Ussery.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Black Cat's Shadow. I'm your host Andy, podcasting from Kansas City, Missouri, and this is episode 6. It's a freaky flashback episode where I review two movies. I review a newer, more popular movie that's kind of getting a buzz right now, and then I also review an older, quote-unquote classic movie released before the year 2000. So the two movies that I'm going to be talking about today are Lights Out from 2016 and The Boogeyman from 1980. And as always, you can find me out there on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Black Cat Podcast. You can find me on Facebook and also Horror Amino. And I like to post some headlines about horror movies and just some other interesting things that I find out there. I'll share it with you guys. So be sure to follow me, like me on Facebook. You can follow me on Horror Amino as well. I've seen a couple of good movies here lately. On Netflix, I watched a movie called The Guest. It's about a man that shows up on this grieving family's doorstep, claiming to be a close friend of their son that just recently died. He said they were both in the military, both enlisted together. But, as is with all kind of horror or thriller movies, all is not as it appears. And so I really like this movie. I heard about it from another podcast here in KC that I listen to called Nightmare Junkhead. I would suggest you guys go check that out. They are hilarious. They crack me up all the time. And they do a lot of cool events here in Kansas City, a lot of cool movie screenings and things like that. So The Guest was directed by Adam Wingard, who also did You're Next and a couple of segments in VHS 1 and 2. And it stars Micah Monroe. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, but she was the lead in It Follows. She did a really good job in this. The movie, it's very stylistic. It's very John Carpenter inspired. It has an awesome soundtrack. Some really good techno music, but also some 80s new wave music. And it really captures the Halloween vibe very well because it takes place in the days leading up to Halloween. So they have Halloween decorations up and stuff. And even the opening credits is very reminiscent of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. If you know that opening scene, which was just perfectly captured the Halloween vibe, this does the same thing. Although this movie is not so much horror as it is more thriller, mystery, but it still has that vibe, and I just love it. I'd say you guys, just go check it out. It's on Netflix, streaming right now. And also on Netflix is a movie called The Hallow. And I heard about this one from another good podcast that I listened to called The Horrorcast. They recently reviewed this movie, so it made me want to go see it. And The Hallow is about a family that moves into a remote house in the countryside in Ireland, and they end up being terrorized by creatures in the surrounding woods. It's an interesting story involving Irish folklore, and there is also some body horror in it, which is something that I really love seeing in a movie. There's some really good practical effects, and the creature design was really good too. And then also on Full Moon Streaming, I told you guys about that last episode, but I watched a couple movies on there. I watched one called Manhattan Baby, and this was directed by Lucio Fulci, who also directed Zombie, which I talked about in the last episode. This kind of caught my attention because it had a really cool movie poster, and so I thought this was going to be an excellent movie. But really, I was kind of disappointed. It's kind of boring. The kills were not very gory, and the story just didn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just, I guess that could be usual for a Fulci film. Some of the Italian movies, they don't make sense sometimes. But as far as there was very little gore and it was just boring, It's kind of unusual for a Fulci film, but basically it's about an archaeologist that opens an Egyptian tomb, and he releases evil spirit. And so the evil spirit goes on to possess his daughter, and it blinds him in the process. Yeah, you know, it kind of goes from there, but I don't know if I'd really recommend watching it. Then another one I watched on Full Moon Streaming was A Blade in the Dark from 1983, and this one was by Lamberto Bava, who also directed Demons and Demons 2. This was a really creepy slasher flick. It's about a musician that he's writing a score for a new horror film, and he rents a villa, and while he's there by himself. There's a groundskeeper or like a caretaker there, but so it's just those guys there, and they're like, these murders start happening, and I don't know what's weirder, like these people just drop by randomly at this guy's house, or they get killed. Well, obviously the killing is more scary, I guess, but it's just weird, like all these random people just kind of show up at his house at different parts. But there's some good kills, some good gore. It has a nice creepy atmosphere, and the score is really good too. Obviously some of the music is repeated because it's about a musician that's working on music for a horror film, so that piece that he's writing is featured heavily in the movie. And I want to share with you guys the updates to some streaming services that I use, just because I know I'm always curious what's been added to Netflix or even Amazon Prime at any given time. So I'm going to give you an update since my last episode, which was July 8th. So since then on Netflix, the movies that have been added are The Invitation and Holidays. I think Holidays is like an anthology movie, and each segment takes place on a different holiday. And then on Amazon Prime, it has quite a few additions in the last couple weeks, so I think it wins the contest. So Amazon Prime added Stir of Echoes 1 and 2, Albert Fish, Zodiac Killer, which is actually done by the same director as The Boogeyman from 1980, 13 Sins, The Culling, The Visitant, Yellow, Asylum, Frostbite, Insane, and a movie called Die Farbe, which is German, but the movie is about, it's an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, so that one will probably be interesting. So those are the movies that have been added to Netflix and Amazon Prime in the last couple weeks. And so now I'm going to go ahead and move into my movie reviews, and I'm going to talk about why I paired up these two movies. The two movies, again, that I'm reviewing are Lights Out from 2016 and The Boogeyman from 1980. And just kind of background why I chose these two. I was trying to find an older movie that was similar to Lights Out, and I was going with the Shadow People vein. You know, kind of, I was trying to find a movie from before the year 2000 that had like a shadow creature or shadow person or something. I was having trouble finding older movies like that. I found there was a Twilight Zone from the 80s that dealt with the Shadow Man. That was really cool, but I wanted to find a movie. And of course, there was a couple of more recent movies out called They, from I think it was actually from the year 2000, so it was just a year too new for me. And then also Darkness Falls, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. They're kind of movies about creatures or ghosts that only exist in the darkness, and they're actually harmed by light. So other than them, I couldn't really find a whole lot. So then I went with the whole Boogeyman theme. I was like, well, okay, on Lights Out, there's like this shadowy figure that's kind of terrorizing a kid. So then I said, okay, Boogeyman movies. So then I found the Boogeyman from 1980, and I just picked that one. There may be some other Boogeyman movies out there, but this is the most accessible one that I found. It's on Amazon Prime streaming right now. So these are the two movies I'm going to talk about, and so now I'm going to move into my review for Lights Out from 2016.
Every time I turn off the lights, there's this woman waiting in the shadows.
I see her too. Each one of us is being haunted by this thing.
Mom?
Hey, Martin, what's up? Did we wake you?
What?
A long time ago, I had a friend named Diana. And something really bad happened to her.
Everyone is afraid of the dark. And that's what she feeds on.
Show yourself.
Becca? Are we gonna die?
No. We need to find more light.
So Lights Out from 2016, the movie was adapted from a short film that's on YouTube right now. And I just watched it shortly after watching the movie Lights Out, because I had not seen the short film before I watched the movie. I kind of watched it in reverse. But I thought that the short film was really creepy. The ghost was actually really scary looking. I'm surprised they didn't stay more with that creature design. And I also saw the actress from the short film was in the opening scene for Lights Out. And so Lights Out will be released on July 22nd, 2016. I was able to go to an advanced screening. That's why I was able to see it already. It is rated PG-13. So just a basic summary of the plot. The movie opens up. It's at nighttime. We're in a dark industrial warehouse where a woman's working. And she sees a shadowy figure, and it really scares her. So she goes to tell her boss, who's a guy named Paul, and it shows him FaceTiming with his son, who's Martin, and he's talking to his son. His son's worried about his mom, and the son said that she's scaring him. She's talking to herself, and Paul's like, "Yeah, I know, buddy. I'm working on helping her mom. I'm going to help her out and help her to get better." When he hangs up with his son, and then the woman comes in and tells him she sees something and she doesn't know what it is, and she's really freaked out. So he tells her just to go home, and he's going to finish closing up. And it also shows him with this file folder with a name stamped on it, but it becomes important later on in the movie. He goes along with the process of closing up the shop, but he ends up getting killed by this shadowy figure. And it's not really a spoiler because it happens in the first 5 minutes of the movie. So, after his death, his wife Sophie kind of goes into a downward spiral. Her son's really getting freaked out. He was already freaked out to begin with because she had some kind of mental episode and she was talking to herself. So Martin, he's this kid. He's having trouble sleeping. His mom she's become a hermit. She doesn't leave the house. And she's just talking to this unseen presence. So he keeps falling asleep in school. So the school's trying to reach his mom, but she's not answering. And so they actually call his stepsister, who is Rebecca, another main character of the story. And we find out that Rebecca is actually estranged from her mother, Sophie. Because of her mental issues, Rebecca left home and hasn't really talked to her mom. But Rebecca goes to pick up Martin from school. And we're also introduced to Brett, who's Rebecca's boyfriend. So Rebecca takes Martin home and confronts their mother about what's been going on, and finds out she hasn't been taking her medication, and so Rebecca is telling her she's neglecting Martin and blaming her for that, and Martin also tells Rebecca that he's seen Diana, this person Diana, and Rebecca kind of gets freaked out, but she tells him that it's just an imaginary, not to be afraid of her. And then, so we find out that this shadowy figure, Diana, has been terrorizing this family for some time, or at least the kids, and it terrorized Rebecca when she was a child, and so now it's also scaring Martin. And we find out that this creature or this ghost only comes around when their mother is battling with her mental issues and not taking her medication. So then, so it's up to Rebecca and Brett to figure out the mystery of Diana and to protect her stepbrother, and hopefully help her mother too in the process. This movie was directed by David F. Sandberg, who also was responsible for creating the Lights Out short movie, and he's also directing Annabelle 2, which is currently in production. The screenplay is written by Eric Heiserer, who also wrote The Thing from 2011 and Final Destination 5, and he also wrote A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake from 2010. So for better or worse, that's what else he's worked on. So they basically adapted this from the short film. It doesn't really follow the short film at all. It's just, I think they just kind of took the main premise and then made it into an hour-and-a-half movie. So you got your cast. The main character, I would say, is Rebecca. She's played by Teresa Palmer, who's been in a movie called Warm Bodies, which was that Zom-Com, I guess you call them now, from a few years ago. And she was also in I Am Number 4. She was in Wolf Creek, The Grudge 2, and also the Point Break remake. The little kid, the stepbrother Martin, he was played by Gabriel Bateman, and he was in the Annabelle movie, and he's also been in several episodes of different TV shows. And then you got the boyfriend Brett. He is played by Alexander de Persia, and he was in I Am Legend as just kind of an extra or a bit part. He's also been in several episodes of TV shows. And then you got Paul, that was the dad at the beginning of the movie. He's played by an actor named Billy Burke. And he's most famous for being in Twilight, those movies. He's also in Along Came a Spider. He was in, I think, season 2 of 24. And he was in Red Riding Hood from 2011. And then you have Sophie, the mother, who's played by Maria Bello. And she's known for being in Prisoners with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. She was also in A History of Violence, that was directed by David Cronenberg. She was in Secret Window with Johnny Depp, and also Payback, that featured Mel Gibson. And then the actual ghost or creature, whatever you want to call her, Diana, she was actually played by Alicia Vela Bailey, who pretty much is just like a stunt person. In all the other movies she's been in, she's done stunts. And I think that's probably appropriate for the way the creature moved and stuff. I think it was good to have like a stunt person playing that part. So I was able to, like I said, I went to an advanced screening of this movie, and I was able to see it, go to this thanks to the Kansas City Horror Club. They were giving out free passes. And, if you're in the Kansas City area, I would say check out that club. They, it's a group of really cool people that put on some really cool horror-related events around town throughout the year. I just went to a meeting recently, my first meeting recently, and I got to meet people, and I had a lot of fun. So I would say if you're in the area, check it out. So about this movie, there was definitely some things that I liked about it and some things I didn't like. It's one of those, I kind of call it a roller coaster movie. It's a fun movie. There's plenty of good jump scares to it. I feel like the practical effects were really good. I'm sure there was some CGI, but I didn't really notice when it was CGI and when it wasn't. So like I said, there was an actual person playing Diana, so that was good. And so they were able to do a lot of practical effects because of that, because of her skill with her movements and stuff. And I thought the creature design was pretty good too. It was pretty scary. And it may be like in the middle of the movie or the action a little bit, like the opening scene was really creepy and scary, and then at the end the intensity really picked up. And you really care about the characters by the end. There was some good character development, especially with the boyfriend Brett. When you're first introduced to him, he kind of seemed like a throwaway character, like, oh, this guy's going to get killed, but there's some good development there with him. And I thought that for a PG-13 movie, the deaths were pretty good. There was some gore. Basically all the kills, they did happen off screen. You don't really see them. And I think that's just kind of naturally what's happened because of the nature of the ghost, because the ghost only exists in darkness. So people kind of get killed in the darkness. But you do see the wounds from the attacks. So like I said, there's some gore there. There are some jump scare scenes that at first seemed kind of forced, but like they seemed like they were created just for the jump scares, but they are justified. You do find out there's reasons for things that are happening, some good reasons. And then with Diana, the ghost, there's an interesting backstory to her. I felt like some people might like it better that there's no explanation, but I kind of like explanations for things, why things are happening. I like the creativity to the backstory And it kind of gives you clues there might be more to her than just being a quote unquote boogeyman figure. And her nature, the nature of Diana, is really a good topic of discussion. I don't, without going into spoilers, I think after you see this movie, there's some good discussion that could be had about her. And I think just mainly because of the ties with the mother, Sophie, I think there's some interesting ties there between the two characters. I felt like the acting was really good in this movie, especially between Sophie, the mother, and Rebecca, the daughter. There was some good tension there. You could feel the frustration with the daughter. You could feel her frustration that she had with the mother and not taking care of herself and not taking responsibility for what's going on. And I really thought the ending was really emotional and tragic and really well done. I think with this movie, even though I liked it, I feel like it's still just kind of an average horror movie. Nothing really stood out for me in this movie. I feel like it's going to be one of those ones that's going to get lost in the shuffle, and a year from now people are not going to really remember it. So I didn't feel like there was a lot of depth to the characters. There was some good character development to the characters, but I feel like they could have gone deeper with like some of their backstories, like what they did for a living. As far as like Rebecca and Brett, I feel like they were artists of some kind, because like in Rebecca's apartment you saw a lot of artwork everywhere, and I was really interested to learn more about her and Brett and what they did. I felt like the characters were just generic. I felt like they were really generic and vanilla. And I also felt like the score was not great. It's just kind of generic orchestra music. I felt like some scenes were deliberately created to make it scarier for some of the jump scares. I feel like there was like especially one scene that just didn't happen naturally with like the lights flickering. I was wondering why were the lights flickering at that point? Were they trying to say that the ghost had control over the lights? So I felt like there was some parts where they created darkness just so they could have a jump scare. And then, some of the jump scares were predictable as well. I didn't expect a lot of violence or gore since it was PG-13, but the movie actually went above my expectations on that. So overall, I feel like this was an average horror movie. I liked it, but it was kind of just vanilla, kind of plain. But it did have some good scares, and it had an interesting villain with an interesting backstory. So with that, I feel like it took it just a notch above average. So for this movie, I'm going to give it a rating of 3.5 out of 5. And I would say, if you have a chance to go see it in the theater, I would say, yeah, definitely go check it out in the theater. Because like I said, it is kind of like a roller coaster movie. There's plenty of thrills in it. If you don't get a chance, definitely check it out on streaming or something. I don't know if I would say this is a blind buy worthy movie. I would say like rent it or go see it in the theater before you actually buy it. So now I'm going to move into my review of The Boogeyman from 1980.
Did they warn you about the Boogeyman? He hurt bad children and did terrible things to their mommies. But you can't kill the Boogeyman. Now, the most terrifying nightmare of childhood returns. The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman. He's going to get you. And you. And you.
You're not going to scare me.
Had its own power. The Boogeyman. You can't hide from him. By the time they believe in him, it'll be too late. Boogeyman. He's going to get you.
So The Boogeyman was released on November 7th, 1980. And I guess you could say there is a franchise of Boogeyman movies. And actually, I'm talking about an older franchise and not the newer ones that was released in after the year 2000. The sequels to The Boogeyman from 1980 was largely just recycled footage from the first movie. But there was two movies. There was Revenge of the Boogeyman, and there was also Return of the Boogeyman. And I think I would try to watch one of the movies. I can't remember which one it was, if it was Revenge or Return. But I had to shut it off after like 15 or 20 minutes because it was basically just recycled footage from the first movie, and I just couldn't get into it. But I guess The Boogeyman was also remade as Boogeyman Reincarnation. So this movie was rated R. So the movie's about a young brother and sister who are called Lacey and Willie as the characters, and they are, being abused by their mother's boyfriend. So the movie kind of picks up, when these characters are younger, like younger kids, and so the brother actually ends up killing the boyfriend. And then the story kind of picks up after Lacey and Willie are grown-ups. Willie has lost the ability to speak, and Lacey is now married to a guy named Jake, and they have a son, Kevin. And Willie actually lives with Lacey and her family on a farm, and they live with Lacey and Willie's aunt and uncle. And so it comes out, you kind of find out that Lacey also has some unresolved psychological trauma from all of this. She's having recurring nightmares where she's being murdered. So her husband Jake decides to take her to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist thinks it would be a good idea for her to go to their childhood home and to see how it's changed, and for her to confront her fears. But while they're there, there's actually some things that have stayed the same from when they were kids. For instance, there's a mirror in the bedroom that was there on the night that her brother killed the boyfriend. I guess the mirror caught the reflection of the murder. So I guess somehow the spirit of the boyfriend is now caught in this mirror, and Lacey sees the image of the boyfriend, sees the spirit of the boyfriend in the mirror, and she freaks out and breaks the mirror with a chair. And so the mirror is now broken into a bunch of little pieces. And somehow the boyfriend's spirit is still tied to the mirror, but kind of it's in pieces, so it's kind of let free now to be wherever the pieces of the mirror are. So the husband, Jake, he kind of picks up all the pieces, and he wants to take the mirror with him and put it back together because he wants Lacey to still confront her fears, symbolized by this mirror, I guess. And so they take the mirror back to the farm where they're living, and so that's when they begin to be terrorized by the spirit of the boyfriend. So this movie was directed by Yuli Lamo. Pretty much his filmography is a lot of true crime type movies, and also the sequels to this movie. And this movie was written by Yuli Lamo, and his other writing credits are the sequels to this and the true crime movies that he's made. And also Susanna Love worked on writing the screenplay, and she actually played Lacey in this movie. And her other writing credits are the sequels to this and just other Yuli Lamo movies. And I guess they were married for a time, and that's probably why she was so involved in writing this and some of his other movies. And then also David Herschel is credited as writing this, but he doesn't have any other movies to his credit. And so you got the cast. So you got Lacey, is kind of the main character, that's played by Susanna Love, who, she's married to the director, and she's basically just done his movies. That's the only other thing to her credit. Her husband Jake was played by Ron James, which he doesn't have any other movies to his credit. And the psychiatrist was Dr. Warren. He was actually played by John Carradine, and he's got quite a few B movies and horror movies to his credit. He was in The Twilight Zone in the 80s. He was in a movie called House of the Long Shadows that featured Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, and Christopher Lee. And he was in The Howling. He was also in a cheesy movie called Monstroid. He was in The Night Strangler, which was the made-for-TV movie that was a precursor for Kolchak the Night Stalker, the TV series, which I am a huge fan of. And he was also in The Twilight Zone, the original series. He was in the episode The Howling Man, which is one of the more popular episodes. The brother Willie, he was played by Nicholas Love, which is the brother to Susanna. But he was also in the Twin Peaks TV series, and he was also in the movie Deadpool. It was the Dirty Harry movie. And then there's the little son of Lacey and Jay, Kevin. He was played by an actor named Raymond Boyden, but he doesn't have any other movies to his credit. So I first saw this movie on Netflix several years ago. I think I had to order that disc at that point, but this was on my quest to see every 80s slasher movie ever made, and so this was kind of fit that category. And I remember back when I first watched it, I really liked this movie, and I think that on a rewatch, it doesn't really hold up. So I'm going to go into kind of what I liked and didn't like about it. Now, one of the things that I really liked about this movie was it was very much inspired by John Carpenter, very much inspired by Halloween. I love the score of this movie. It reminded me of like Halloween 3. There was very much a synthesizer type score to it. But this movie had some good atmosphere. I think it captured the John Carpenter atmosphere and the Halloween atmosphere very well. And there's lots of scenes that are very reminiscent of Halloween, the first Halloween movie. And there's lots of like red and green in the shots, especially at the end. So that was a really, really big nod to John Carpenter, which I appreciated. And I thought the story with the killer tied to the mirror was interesting, because the mirror kind of caught the reflection of his death. It kind of caught his spirit in the process, I guess. So that was interesting. And there was some decent gore in one of the deaths of the movie. There's like scissors to the neck, which I thought looked kind of cool. And the farmhouse that this all kind of took place in looked like the Amityville house. And I don't know if that was on purpose or if they were trying to reference back to the Amityville horror. But I thought the house was kind of cool looking. This movie has a lot of flaws, so, the acting was not the greatest, especially the little girl that played Lacey in the very beginning. I didn't think she acted very good at all. While I liked the score, I felt like it was overpowering at times with the dialogue. And then there was a scene where like a character was kind of like possessed by the ghost of the killer, and it was Lacey, and I don't know if it's really a spoiler or not, but there was a scene where she was like talking like the killer, but it was really cheesy. It wasn't really scary. And as far as the story goes, while it was kind of interesting, there wasn't a whole lot of logic to it. I thought it was weird that they were trying to get rehab for Lacey to help her with her psychological trauma, but like with her brother, he couldn't even speak. There was no attempt to like for rehab for him or anything. I thought that was really weird. And also he kind of like already knew about the mirrors. Like there was going to be some significance to the mirrors. Like he needed to cover up the mirrors, and they didn't really like explain how he knew about that. And just at times the story didn't really make a lot of sense. And I thought that the kills, they were very lame. There were a lot of lame kills in this movie. There was one good kill, but the rest of the kills were just silly. Like there's one boy, he got his head like a window just closed on his head, but there was no gore or anything. And then another girl was just kind of like slapped in the face with a medicine cabinet. I was like, what? Is she dead? And I thought that was really silly. And the ending was pretty cheesy. There was a part where like a piece of the mirror like flew and attached itself to like one of the characters' faces and like possessed him, and it just looked kind of goofy and it wasn't really scary at all. So this movie definitely has flaws. I think overall I didn't really like it, but it does get points for me for like referencing John Carpenter. So I'm going to give this movie 2.5 out of 5. And I would say the only reason that this might be worth a watch is if you're an 80s slasher junkie and you've just got to watch them all. And or if you're a B-movie fan, you like movies that are kind of so bad it's good. It's that kind of fun movie. You could take it as that. And also, if you're a John Carpenter fan and you want to see a film that was heavily influenced, or that film that heavily references Halloween and just his style in general, I'd say check it out. And it's on Amazon Prime right now, so if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. So I think, in this older movie, newer movie kind of comparison, I think the newer movie definitely won out. As much as I hate to say it, because I'm trying to kind of steer you guys to watching some of these classic movies, there was some stinkers that were made back in the day too. But that's okay. I still had fun watching both of these movies, and I think you guys would definitely have fun checking out Lights Out, and in some cases The Boogeyman from 1980. So guys, that's going to be it for me. I want to thank you guys for joining me once again, and I hope that you found these reviews informative and useful in deciding whether or not to watch them. And remember to look closer at the world around you, and you might just find it a stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat's shadow.